I found a hidden pregnancy test in our trash and my husband quickly snapped that he never wanted kids as if I was the problem. But the truth was far darker. He was expecting a baby with the woman he'd been secretly seeing. I stayed calm, collected proof, and later watched his double life collapse in front of everyone. I never wanted kids, Lydia. You know that. Jude said those words to me 3 years ago, firm and final, when my sister announced her second pregnancy. He made it clear. No children. No discussion. Our life was perfect the way it was. So when I found the positive pregnancy test in our bathroom trash that Wednesday morning, my brain went through a very specific sequence. Then hope. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Then reality. I have an IUD. 4 years, never failed, confirmed working at my last appointment 6 weeks ago. That test wasn't mine. Couldn't be mine. Someone else had taken that test in my bathroom. In my home. My husband was having an affair. And the other woman was carrying his baby. The baby he told me he never wanted. I stood there in the kitchen, garbage bag half lifted, staring at that white plastic stick wedged between coffee grounds and yesterday's takeout containers. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Undeniable. My hands started shaking. I heard footsteps from the bedroom. Jude was awake. I tied the bag quickly, carried it to the hallway trash chute like I did every Wednesday morning and dropped it down. 4 floors to the basement. Gone. But the image was burned into my mind. When I walked back into the apartment, Jude was in the kitchen pouring coffee. He didn't look up from his phone. "Morning," he said, voice flat. "Morning," I replied. My voice sounded normal. Steady. Like I hadn't just discovered that my entire marriage was a performance. He scrolled through emails while I pulled bread from the cabinet and put it in the toaster. He asked if I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. I said yes. He mentioned he'd be late tonight. Inventory at the bookstore. I nodded. Buttered toast neither of us would eat. He kissed my cheek on his way out. Quick. Automatic. Already thinking about his day. The door closed behind him and I stood alone in the silence of our loft apartment. I'm Lydia Brennan. 34 years old. Senior financial analyst at a boutique investment firm in downtown Portland. I've built my career on finding patterns in data, spotting discrepancies others miss, turning chaos into something organized and clear. I'm good at my job because I notice details. Because I ask questions when numbers don't add up. And this didn't add up. We'd been married 7 years. Lived in this converted loft in the Pearl District for 5. Exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Open floor plan that felt modern and sophisticated when we first signed the lease. Jude loved it because it was 3 blocks from his bookstore. I loved it because I could walk to my office in 10 minutes. From the outside we looked like the perfect urban couple. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market buying organic vegetables we'd forget to cook. Wine tastings in the Willamette Valley. Weekend trips to Cannon Beach where we'd walk barefoot on the sand and take photos that made our life look enviable. But lately something had felt wrong. Jude came home later than usual. Always had an excuse. Author event at the store. Supplier meeting. Inventory that took longer than expected. When he was home he was distracted. I'd talk about my day, a difficult client, a project deadline, and he'd nod without really listening. His phone was always face down on the table. He'd take calls in the other room. When I'd ask who it was he'd say it was just Greg, his business partner or a vendor. I told myself it was stress. The bookstore wasn't doing well financially. Independent stores were struggling against online retailers and corporate chains. Jude worried about keeping the lights on, about making payroll for his small staff. I believed that because I wanted to. Because the alternative was something I didn't want to face. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Marcus, my colleague at the firm, reminding me about our 9 o'clock client meeting. I glanced at the time. 8:15. I needed to leave in 10 minutes but I couldn't move. My mind kept replaying the image of that pregnancy test. Trying to make sense of it. Trying to find some explanation that didn't end with betrayal. Finally I forced myself into motion. Got dressed. Pulled my hair into a ponytail. Grabbed my laptop bag and coffee mug. Locked the door behind me and walked toward the office like it was just another Wednesday. The walk usually cleared my head. Fresh air. City noise. The rhythm of concrete under my feet. But today I couldn't stop thinking. Who is she? How long had this been going on? Had he brought her to our home while I was at work? I reached my building, took the elevator to the 12th floor and walked past reception with a smile that felt like a mask. My office was at the end of the hall. Corner space with windows on two sides. Normally I loved the view. Today I barely saw it. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Stared at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes without processing a single number. Marcus knocked around 10 holding a folder of quarterly reports. "You good, Lydia?" he asked. I looked up, realizing I hadn't moved in who knows how long. "Yeah," I said. "Just didn't sleep well." He studied me for a second like he didn't quite believe me, but he didn't push. Marcus and I had worked together for 5 years. He knew when to let things go. "Client meeting went well this morning," he said, setting the folder on my desk. "They signed. 3-year contract." "That's great." He lingered in the doorway. "You sure you're okay?" "Just a headache." "I'll be fine." After he left, I closed my office door. Then I opened a private browser window and started searching. I'm an analyst. When something doesn't make sense, I gather data. I look for patterns. I build a framework to understand what I'm dealing with. So I searched. Signs your spouse is cheating. How to tell if your husband is having an affair. Hidden relationships. Secret pregnancies. Article after article loaded. I read them methodically, taking notes in an encrypted document on my laptop, building a mental checklist. If Jude was hiding a pregnancy, he was hiding a woman. And if there was a woman, there would be evidence. Phone records. Credit card statements. Calendar gaps. Unexplained absences. I just had to find it. My sister Emma called around 6 that evening while I was standing in the kitchen pretending to make dinner. I had pasta boiling and sauce heating, but I wasn't really paying attention to either. "Hey," she said, kids screaming in the background. "Quick question. Are you and Jude coming to Mom's birthday dinner next month?" "Yeah, we'll be there." "Good. Also, I have news." She paused. "I'm pregnant again." I stirred the sauce, forced enthusiasm into my voice. "Emma, that's amazing. Congratulations." "Thanks. We're so excited. It's a girl this time." Another pause. "You and Jude still not thinking about kids?" There was. The question she always asked, wrapped in casual curiosity but heavy with judgment. Emma had the life our mother envisioned for both of us. The suburban house. The minivan. The PTA meetings and family game nights. She'd married her high school sweetheart at 23, had her first baby at 25, and built her entire identity around motherhood. I'd chosen differently. College. Career. City life. Independence. We made different choices and neither of us was entirely comfortable with what the other had picked. "We're happy as we are," I said, the answer I always gave. "I just think you'd be such a good mom, Lydia. And you're not getting any younger." I bit back the response I wanted to give. "I know. We'll see." After we hung up, I stood at the stove stirring sauce that was starting to burn. I thought about that conversation 3 years ago. The one where Jude made his position crystal clear. We'd been driving home from a family dinner where everyone had been congratulating Emma on her second pregnancy. My mom had made pointed comments about biological clocks and giving her more grandchildren. In the car, I'd asked Jude what he thought about it. He'd been firm. Direct. "I'm not interested in the whole parent thing. I like our life the way it is. Just us. No complications. No sacrifices." I'd agreed because I thought I felt the same way. Because my career mattered. Because freedom mattered. Now, standing alone in our kitchen while he worked late again, I realized I didn't know what I wanted anymore. But that didn't matter. Because the pregnancy test in the trash wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what Jude had been hiding. I turned off the stove, scraped burnt sauce into the sink and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop again. If there was evidence, I'd find it. If there was a trail, I'd follow it. Because I'd built a career on finding patterns in chaos. And my husband had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd never find out. But he forgot who he married. I wasn't the kind of woman who ignored red flags or looked the other way. I was the kind who collected data, built cases, and dismantled lies piece by piece. Tomorrow I'd start digging. Tonight I'd finish this wine and decide exactly how far I was willing to go. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. Jude was still asleep beside me, face relaxed, breathing steady. I watched him for a moment, studied the man I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, and felt nothing but distance. I got up quietly, showered, dressed, and left for work without waking him. The office felt different that Thursday. Or maybe I was different. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on the quarterly projections Marcus had left yesterday. Numbers filled the screen, but I couldn't process any of them. My mind kept circling back to one question. Who was she? Around 10, Marcus knocked on my door holding a stack of folders. "Morning," he said, stepping inside. "Got the updated client reports. Thought you'd want to review them before the meeting this afternoon." He set the folders on my desk, then paused. "You okay? You seemed off yesterday." I forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." "I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. "Lydia, if something's going on." "It's nothing," I interrupted, keeping my voice light. "Really? Just tired." He studied me for another second, then nodded. "All right. But if you need to talk, I'm around." After he left, I closed my office door and locked it. Then I opened a private browser window and started searching. How to tell if your spouse is cheating. Signs of infidelity. What to do if you find evidence of an affair. Divorce lawyers in Oregon. I read article after article, clicking through pages, absorbing information the way I did with financial data. My analytical brain kicked into high gear. The same brain that had saved my firm $500,000 last quarter by spotting a pattern in quarterly discrepancies that everyone else had missed. If Jude was hiding a pregnancy, he was hiding a woman. And if there was a woman, there would be evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, unexplained purchases, timeline gaps. I opened a new encrypted document on my personal laptop and started taking notes. Building a framework. Creating a system to organize what I knew and what I needed to find out. I worked through lunch, ignoring emails, letting calls go to voicemail. By 3 o'clock I had a plan. That evening, Jude texted me around 5. "Author reading tonight at the store. Local poet. Probably won't be home until after 11. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Okay. Have fun." The moment I heard his car pull out of the garage, I went to work. I started in the bathroom, pulling everything out from under the sink. Cleaning supplies. Extra toilet paper. A box of tampons. Rolled towels stacked in the back corner. Behind the towels, tucked against the wall, I found something that didn't belong. A small zippered makeup bag. Navy blue canvas material, definitely not mine. My hands were shaking as I unzipped it. Inside, a bottle of prenatal vitamins, a packet of folic acid supplements, and a folded receipt from a women's health clinic. I unfolded the receipt carefully, like it might disintegrate if I moved too fast. Date: 2 weeks ago. Service: initial prenatal consultation. Patient name printed at the top in small black letters. Simone Callahan. I didn't recognize the name. My chest felt tight. My breathing shallow. I sat on the bathroom floor with the receipt in my hand and stared at the vitamins. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was real. There was another woman. She was pregnant. And Jude had been helping her hide evidence of it in our home. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The bag. The vitamins. The receipt. Multiple angles, clear shots, timestamps visible. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Zipped the bag. Tucked it behind the towels. Arranged them the way they'd been before. No trace that I'd been there. I stood up, looked at myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. My hands were still trembling. I gripped the edge of the sink, forced myself to breathe slowly, and walked out of the bathroom. The bedroom was next. I went through Jude's dresser methodically. Top drawer first. Socks, underwear, nothing unusual. Second drawer. T-shirts, gym clothes, still nothing. Bottom drawer. Sweaters he never wore, folded neatly, taking up most of the space. I lifted the sweaters carefully. Underneath, pressed flat against the bottom of the drawer, was a phone. Not his regular phone. This one was older, cheap, a basic Android model. No case. No lock screen. I powered it on and waited while it loaded. The home screen appeared. No apps except the basics. Messages. Phone. Camera. I opened the messages. The list loaded slowly, and when it did, my stomach dropped. Hundreds of texts. All between Jude and someone saved in the contacts as S. I scrolled through them, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Pet names. Babe. I love. Can't wait to see you. Photos I wished I'd never seen. Pictures of them together. her smiling at the camera, his arm around her waist. Text conversations about the pregnancy, about what they were going to do, about names for the baby. Arguments where she was frustrated, angry. You keep saying you'll leave her, but you never do. When are you going to tell Lydia? I'm not raising this baby in secret, Jude. You need to decide. His responses were always the same. Reassuring. Stalling. I need time. Lydia's complicated. I have to handle this carefully. I promise I'll tell her soon. Just give me a few more weeks. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, reading message after message. I wasn't complicated. I was just in the way. I connected the phone to my laptop with a USB cable and opened the file transfer window. Copied everything. Every text. Every photo. Every call log. The transfer took about 10 minutes. I watched the progress bar move across the screen, numb, detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. When it finished, I ejected the phone, wiped my fingerprints off with the edge of my shirt, and put it back in the drawer exactly where I'd found it. I rearranged the sweaters on top, checked that everything looked undisturbed, and closed the drawer. Then I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat at the table with my laptop. I opened the copied files and started going through them systematically. Text messages organized by date. Photos sorted into folders. Call logs showing timestamps and duration. The earliest messages went back 8 months. 8 months. This wasn't some recent mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was planned. Deliberate. A whole second life built carefully while I worked 60-hour weeks to keep our finances stable. I took notes. Built a timeline. Cross-referenced dates with my own calendar to see when Jude had said he was working late, when he'd said he had supplier meetings, when he'd said he had author events. Almost every late night matched up with messages to Simone. I heard his car pull into the garage just after 11. I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and walked into the bedroom. Changed into pajamas. Got into bed with a book. Turned on the lamp. The front door opened. His keys hit the bowl on the entry table. Footsteps down the hall. He walked into the bedroom, pulling off his jacket. How was the reading? I asked, not looking up from my book. Good, he said. Decent crowd. Sold some books. He smelled like red wine and something floral. Perfume maybe. Or maybe I was imagining it. He kissed my forehead, quick, automatic, no feeling behind it, and headed into the bathroom. I listened to the water run in the shower and thought about all the lies he'd told. All the times he'd come home late smelling like wine, blaming it on store events. All the times he'd said he loved me while texting another woman on a hidden phone. All the times he'd told me he didn't want kids while planning a family with someone else. I should have felt devastated. Heartbroken. Destroyed. But I didn't. I felt cold. Focused. Clear. Because I knew something he didn't know I knew. And that gave me power. He came out of the shower, climbed into bed beside me, and within minutes his breathing had evened out into sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and started planning my next move. Tomorrow I'd find a lawyer. Tomorrow I'd start building a case. Tonight I'd let him sleep peacefully, thinking he'd gotten away with it. Thinking I'd never find out. Thinking I was too trusting, too busy, too naive to notice. That was his mistake. I didn't go to work the next morning. I called Marcus at 7:30, voice carefully flat, and told him I had a migraine. Needed to take a sick day. He said to feel better, no questions asked. The moment I hung up, I was already getting dressed. I couldn't sit through client meetings and budget reviews when my entire life was falling apart. I needed answers. I needed a plan. And I needed someone who knew how to handle situations like this professionally. By 8:30, I was sitting in my car outside a downtown law office, staring at the glass door with Rebecca Walsh, family law attorney, etched into it. I'd found her name last night during my research. Every article about high-profile Oregon divorces mentioned her. Described her as sharp, ruthless, thorough. Exactly what I needed. I walked inside. The office was all glass and steel, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my car. Modern art on the walls. Everything about it said expensive and efficient. The receptionist looked up. Do you have an appointment? No, I said. But I need to speak with Rebecca Walsh. It's urgent. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Spoke quietly for a moment. Hung up. She can give you 15 minutes. Please have a seat. I sat on a leather couch that was almost too firm to be comfortable and waited. 10 minutes later, a woman appeared in the hallway. Early 50s, gray hair cut into a sharp bob, wearing a tailored black suit. Her eyes were the kind that didn't miss anything. "Mrs. Brennan," she said. "I'm Rebecca Walsh. Come with me." Her office was just as minimalist as the lobby. Large desk. 2 chairs. Windows overlooking the city. No personal photos. No clutter. Just clean lines and focus. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Tell me what's going on." I sat down and laid it all out. The pregnancy test in the trash. The IUD that made it impossible for the test to be mine. The makeup bag hidden in the bathroom with prenatal vitamins and a clinic receipt. The burner phone in Jude's dresser with hundreds of messages to a woman named Simone Callahan. The photos. The arguments about when he'd leave me. The promises he'd made to her. I pulled out my laptop and showed her the screenshots I'd taken. Messages. Call logs. The clinic receipt. Rebecca listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, expression completely neutral. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "This is solid evidence," she finally said. "But we need more. I'm going to connect you with a private investigator. We need confirmation of who this woman is, timeline documentation, and ideally proof that your husband's been spending money on her. Shared funds, business accounts, credit cards. Anything that shows financial misconduct." "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Oregon is a no-fault divorce state," Rebecca explained. "You don't have to prove wrongdoing to get divorced. But if we can prove he's been misusing marital assets to support an affair, that shifts the asset division in your favor. Significantly." I nodded slowly, processing. "One more thing," she added, her voice firm. "Don't confront him yet. The moment he knows you know, he'll start covering his tracks. Deleting messages. Hiding money. Coaching this woman on what to say. You need to let him think everything's normal while we build the case." I felt something twist in my chest. How am I supposed to do that? Go home and smile at him? Sleep next to him? Rebecca's expression didn't change. "You do what you have to do. Because if you want to come out of this with what you deserve, you need to be smarter than your anger." He was right. I hated that she was right, but she was. I left her office 20 minutes later with a retainer agreement signed and a plan in motion. My next stop was the bank. I walked into the branch near my office, asked to speak with someone about opening a new account, and was led to a desk in the back. The banker was young, professional, efficient. I told her I wanted an individual account. No joint access. Just my name. She set it up within 15 minutes. As soon as I left the bank, I logged into my firm's payroll system and changed my direct deposit information. Starting next pay period, my salary would go into the new account. Not the joint one Jude and I had shared for 7 years. Then I transferred a chunk of my recent bonus. Not all of it, that would be too obvious, but enough to feel like I had a safety net. If this marriage was ending, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. That afternoon, I met Rebecca's investigator at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. His name was Owen Marks. Former detective, she'd said. Early 60s, Rebecca had mentioned, but he looked older. Gray hair, weathered face, the kind of guy who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. He didn't look like what I expected. No trench coat. No fedora. Just jeans, a plain jacket, and a worn notebook. We sat at a corner table away from other customers. "Rebecca filled me in on the basics," Owen said, pulling out a pen. "But I need details. Your husband's schedule. His habits. Where he goes when he says he's working late. Any patterns you've noticed." I walked him through everything. Jude's routine. The bookstore hours. The late nights he blamed on author events and inventory. The texts I'd found where he and Simone talked about meeting up. Owen took notes, asked clarifying questions, didn't react to anything I said. "I'll need about a week," he finally said. "Maybe 2. I'll follow him, document his movements, see where he goes and who he meets. If there's a second location, apartment, house, whatever, I'll find it." I handed him a flash drive. "Everything's on here. The messages I copied from the burner phone. The clinic receipt. His work schedule." Owen tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Good. I'll be in touch." He stood up, shook my hand, and walked out without another word. I sat there for a few more minutes, staring at my untouched coffee, trying to process what I'd just set in motion. I was hiring someone to follow my husband, documenting his affair, building a case for divorce. This was really happening. I drove home in a daze, parked in the garage and walked into the apartment. Jude wasn't home yet. Still at the bookstore. I changed into comfortable clothes, pulled ingredients out of the fridge and started making dinner. Pasta. Garlic bread. The kind of meal I'd made 100 times before. By the time Jude walked through the door at 6:30, I had everything plated and waiting on the table. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. "This smells great." "Thought I'd make something nice," I said, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" He launched into a story about a difficult customer who'd argued with him over a return policy. I nodded in the right places, asked follow-up questions, laughed when he made a joke. We ate dinner like a normal couple. Talked about his plans to expand the bookstore, maybe add a small coffee bar in the back corner to bring in more foot traffic. I asked questions, pretended to care, played the role of supportive wife. But the whole time all I could think about was Simone. Who was she? How had they met? How long had this been going on? Was she pretty? Younger than me? Did she know he was married or had he lied to her too? After dinner we watched television on the couch. Some crime procedural Jude liked. I sat next to him, close enough that our shoulders touched and felt nothing but distance. He fell asleep halfway through the episode, head tilted back against the cushions. I watched him for a moment, studied his face. The man I'd married 7 years ago. The man I'd built a life with. And felt absolutely nothing. Later that night, lying in bed beside him in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and listened to him breathe. Steady. Unbothered. Peaceful. He wasn't losing sleep over this. Wasn't wrestling with guilt or fear or doubt. He thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought I'd never find out. Thought I was too trusting, too busy, too naive to notice. That was his first mistake. And I was going to make sure he paid for it. 5 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. I went to work. Smiled at colleagues. Sat through meetings. Came home and made dinner. Pretended everything was normal while waiting for Owen to call. Jude didn't notice anything different. Why would he? I'd been playing this role perfectly. On Tuesday afternoon my phone finally buzzed with a text from Owen. "I've got something. Same place, 1 hour." I left work early, told Marcus I had a dentist appointment, and drove to the coffee shop where we'd met before. Owen was already there, sitting at the same corner table with a manila folder in front of him. I sat down across from him, heart pounding. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Just slid the folder across the table. "Open it," he said. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Time-stamped, dated, organized chronologically. Jude walking up to a small apartment building in northwest Portland. Keys in hand. Not knocking. Not waiting. Just unlocking the door like he lived there. Another photo. Jude leaving the same building 2 hours later, carrying takeout bags, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. More photos from different days. Same building. Same routine. Always during my work hours. "I followed him 3 times over the past week," Owen said, voice flat and professional. "Always the same pattern. Arrives between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. Stays 2 to 3 hours. Leaves looking relaxed." I stared at the photos, unable to speak. Owen continued. "The apartment's rented under her name. Simone Callahan. 29 years old. Works as a yoga instructor at a studio about 6 blocks from your husband's bookstore. 29. 8 years younger than me. But here's where it gets interesting," Owen said, pulling out another set of documents. "The rent payments aren't coming from her account. They're coming from your husband's business account. $1,800 a month. Been going on for 6 months. 6 months. The words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't some recent mistake. Some moment of weakness. This was established. Planned. A whole second life carefully built while I worked 60-hour weeks to keep our finances stable." Owen spread more documents across the table. Bank statements. Credit card receipts. Purchase orders. "He's been paying for more than just rent," Owen said. "Clinic visits. Maternity clothes. Furniture deliveries." He pointed to one receipt. A crib. Delivered to the apartment 3 weeks ago. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A crib. He wasn't just having an affair. He was preparing to be a father. The same man who'd told me 3 years ago that he didn't want kids. That parenthood would ruin our freedom. That he liked our life exactly the way it was. He'd been building a nursery with another woman. You okay? Owen asked, watching me carefully. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure that was true. There's more, he said. I ran a background check on her. Clean record. No criminal history. She's been at the same yoga studio for 4 years. Lives alone, or did until your husband started spending half his time there. He pulled out one more photo. This one was different. Taken from across the street, zoomed in slightly. Jude and Simone standing on the apartment balcony. His arm around her waist. Her hand resting on a visible baby bump. They looked happy. Comfortable. Like a couple. Like the couple we used to be. I closed the folder, unable to look anymore. I'll send you the digital copies, Owen said. Everything's documented. Dates, times, locations. If you need me to testify, I will. Thank you, I managed to say. He nodded once, stood up and left. I sat there alone with the folder in front of me, hands shaking, trying to process everything I'd just learned. Then I drove home. I parked in the garage, but I couldn't get out of the car. I just sat there for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. 6 months of lies. 6 months of him paying for another woman's life while sharing a bed with me. 6 months of planning a future that didn't include me. Finally, I forced myself to move. Walked into the apartment. Changed clothes. Tried to act normal. That night, after Jude left for another supposed late event at the bookstore, I went back to his dresser. The burner phone was still there, tucked under the sweaters in the bottom drawer. I powered it on and opened the messages. New texts. Recent ones. Simone to Jude sent yesterday. I told my parents about the baby. They want to meet you. They're asking when we're going to make this official. You need to decide, are you leaving her or not? Because I'm not raising this child in secret. Jude's response sent just 2 hours ago. I'll tell her this weekend. I promise. Just give me a few more days. This weekend. 3 days from now. He was planning to tell me. Or maybe he was just stalling again like he'd apparently been doing for months. Either way, I wasn't going to wait for him to control the narrative. I took screenshots of everything. Added them to the growing file of evidence on my laptop. Put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I was past shock. Past hurt. Past disbelief. I was in that cold, clear place where decisions get made. The next morning, I called Rebecca from my car before heading into the office. I have everything, I told her. Photos of him entering her apartment. Financial records showing he's been paying her rent with business funds. Text messages where he's promising to leave me. What happens next? I could hear her typing on the other end. We move fast, she said. I'll draft the divorce papers today. We'll include documentation of financial misconduct, using business funds for personal expenses related to an extramarital affair. Will that matter? It will if he has a business partner, Rebecca said. Does he? Yes. Greg Fontaine. They co-own the bookstore 50-50. Friends since college. Perfect, Rebecca said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Using company funds for personal use violates the LLC operating agreement. That's grounds for partnership termination. Send me Greg's contact information. I'll make sure he gets copies of the financial records. My stomach twisted. Greg was a good guy. He didn't deserve to be dragged into this. But he also deserved to know his business partner was stealing from the company. After that, Rebecca continued, we served the papers. Public. At the bookstore. During business hours. Maximum impact. I hesitated for only a second. Then I said, do it. You're sure? Rebecca asked. Once we do this, there's no going back. This will be public. Messy. Everyone will know. I thought about the pregnancy test in the trash. The hidden phone. The apartment he'd been paying for. The crib he'd bought for another woman's baby. The lies he'd told for 6 months while sleeping next to me every night. I'm sure, I said. All right, Rebecca replied. I'll have everything ready by Friday. We'll serve him Monday morning. 10 o'clock sharp. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside the office building, gripping the steering wheel, letting it all sink in. By Monday everyone would know. Jude's business partner. His employees. His customers. The entire Portland literary community. His carefully constructed double life would collapse in a single morning. And I'd be the one who made it happen. I took a deep breath, grabbed my laptop bag and walked into the office. Marcus looked up as I passed his desk. "You okay? You look exhausted." "Long week," I said. "But I'm fine." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. I closed my office door, sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. Then I drafted an email to Greg Fontaine. Subject: Urgent, financial misconduct. I attached the bank statements showing 6 months of payments to Simone's apartment. The credit card receipts. The purchase orders for baby furniture. I kept the message brief. Professional. Factual. "Greg, I'm Jude's wife. I've discovered he's been using business funds for personal expenses related to an extramarital affair. Attached are 6 months of records. I thought you should know before legal proceedings begin. Lydia." I read it 3 times. Then I hit send. There was no going back now. The email sat in my sent folder for exactly 4 hours before my phone buzzed. "Rebecca, Greg called an emergency board meeting. He's furious. Process server is standing by." I stared at the message sitting at my desk, surrounded by quarterly reports I hadn't touched all morning. This was really happening. Another text came through at 2 p.m. Papers delivered. Jude was served in front of Greg and 2 employees at the bookstore. I set my phone down and waited. It took exactly 47 minutes for Jude to start calling. The first call came at 2:47. I let it go to voicemail. Second call. Third. Fourth. By 3:15 he'd called 16 times. I didn't answer any of them. Then my building's front desk called. "Mrs. Brennan, your husband is here. He's asking to come up. He seems upset." I took a breath. "Let him up." "Are you sure?" "Yes. It's fine." I hung up, walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I sat on the couch, legs crossed, and waited. The door flew open less than 2 minutes later. Jude stormed in, face red, hands shaking, holding a folded stack of papers. "What the hell is this, Lydia?" he shouted, waving the divorce documents in the air. I took a slow sip of wine. "Exactly what it looks like. You had me served at work." His voice cracked. "In front of Greg. In front of my employees. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a pretty good idea," I said calmly. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Everyone saw it. Everyone." Greg pulled me into his office the second the server left and started demanding answers. He showed me bank statements. Payments to some apartment I've never even heard of. He thinks I've been stealing from the company. "You have been," I said. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "How did you?" I set my wine glass down on the coffee table. "I found the pregnancy test in the trash, Jude. You weren't even careful." The color drained from his face. "I found the vitamins in the bathroom," I continued, voice steady. "The clinic receipt. The burner phone in your dresser. The hundreds of texts between you and Simone. The photos. The plans for the baby." He took a step back like I'd physically pushed him. "You went through my things?" His voice shifted to anger. "You spied on me?" I almost laughed. "You had a second phone hidden in our bedroom. You've been paying for another woman's apartment with business funds. You've been planning a family behind my back. And you're upset about privacy." He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. "Sit down, Jude," I said. "I don't." "Sit down." He sank onto the arm of the couch, head dropping into his hands. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Lydia, this isn't what you think." "Really?" Kept my tone even. "Then explain it to me." "Simone, she's just..." He struggled for words. "It's complicated." "She's pregnant," I interrupted. "With your baby. The baby you told me you never wanted." He looked up and for the first time I saw something that might have been guilt in his eyes. But I didn't care anymore. "You lied to me for years," I said. "You told me you didn't want kids. That parenthood would ruin our life. That you valued our freedom too much. You made me feel selfish for even considering it. That's not. And the whole time," I continued, voice rising slightly, "you were planning a family with someone else. Building a nursery. Buying cribs. Promising her you'd leave me." He shook his head. "It wasn't planned. Just happened. I didn't mean for..." "Nothing just happens, Jude." My voice was sharp now. "You made choices. You rented her an apartment. You paid for her clinic visits. You bought baby furniture. You promised her a future. Those were all choices. He stood up, tried to move closer. Lydia, please. I held up my hand. Don't. He stopped. This is my home too, he said, voice desperate. You can't just kick me out. I smiled then. It felt cold on my face. Fern. Actually, I can. The lease is in my name only. You're listed as a co-occupant, which means you have no legal claim to this apartment. I spoke to the landlord yesterday. You have until Sunday night to get your things out. After that, I'm donating whatever's left. He stared at me like I was someone he'd never met before. Maybe I was. Maybe the woman he married, the one who smiled and nodded and went along with his plans without question, had stopped existing the moment I found that pregnancy test. You've changed, he said quietly. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending. He tried again. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Simone. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't do this. You'll end things with Simone? I repeated. The mother of your child? It doesn't have to be like this. Yes, it does. I stood up, walked to the door and opened it. Leave, Jude. Lydia. Now. He looked at me for a long moment. I saw confusion, anger, disbelief, and underneath it all something that looked like loss. Then he walked past me out into the hallway. I closed the door behind him, turned the deadbolt and leaned against it. For a few seconds I just stood there listening to my own breathing. Then I walked back to the couch, picked up my wine glass and finished it in one long swallow. My phone buzzed. Rebecca, how'd it go? I typed back. He's gone. Good. Don't let him back in. Don't engage. Let the lawyers handle everything from here. I sent back a thumbs up emoji and set my phone on the table. The apartment was silent. No television. No footsteps. No sound of Jude moving around in the other room. Just quiet. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. The sun was starting to set, casting everything in orange and pink light. Somewhere out there Jude was probably calling Simone. Telling her what happened. Maybe blaming me. Maybe blaming himself. I didn't care which. Somewhere else, Greg was probably sitting in his office going through financial records, realizing how much money Jude had siphoned out of the business. And tomorrow the Portland literary community would start talking. Whispering. Speculating about what had happened. Let them talk. I'd spent 7 years caring what people thought. Maintaining appearances. Playing the role of the perfect wife in the perfect marriage. I was done with that. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus, "Can you cover my meetings tomorrow? I need a personal day." He responded immediately, "Of course. Everything okay?" "It will be," I typed back. And for the first time in weeks I believed it. I walked into the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, a better one this time, and poured myself a proper glass. Then I sat at the table, opened my laptop and started going through the financial documents Rebecca had sent over. Asset division. Bank accounts. Credit cards. The apartment lease. Everything that would need to be sorted out in the divorce. It was going to be messy. Complicated. Expensive. But I didn't care. Because for the first time since I found that pregnancy test I felt like I could breathe. Jude was gone. The lies were exposed. And I was finally, completely in control of my own life again. I took a sip of wine and allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I got married 7 years ago. But it was the ending I deserved. The story broke online by Monday morning. I was sitting at my desk, coffee in hand, trying to focus on a client report when Marcus knocked on my door. "Hey," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Have you seen social media today?" My stomach dropped. "No." "Why?" He pulled out his phone and showed me. A post from someone named at Portland reads, "Drama at Hawthorne Books today. Owner served divorce papers at the store in front of staff. Apparently his wife found out about an affair and misuse of company funds." Yikes. The post had been shared 200 times. The comment section was a mess. Some people defended Jude. "We don't know the whole story. Maybe she's just vindictive." Others tore into him. "Using business money to fund an affair? That's not just cheating, that's theft. Who serves divorce papers at someone's workplace though? That's cold. Who has an affair and gets another woman pregnant? That's worse." I handed the phone back to Marcus. Well, that didn't take long. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, I said, even though I wasn't sure that was true. After he left, I checked my own phone. 37 notifications. Text messages. Missed calls. Direct messages on platforms I hadn't opened in weeks. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reaching out. I heard what happened. Are you okay? Family members asking for details. Is it true? What's going on? I deleted all the apps. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Gone. But my phone kept buzzing. Finally, my sister Emma called. I let it ring twice before answering. Lydia, what's going on? She said immediately. I could hear her kids screaming in the background. Mom called me this morning asking about Jude. She saw something online. I took a breath. Jude had an affair. Got another woman pregnant. Used business money to pay for her apartment. I filed for divorce. Silence on the other end. Then Emma said, voice flat, I never liked him. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It was absurd and perfect and exactly what I needed to hear. You never told me that. You seemed happy, she said. I wasn't going to mess that up. But honestly, he always felt fake to me. Like he was performing being a good husband instead of actually being one. Yeah, I said quietly. That sounds about right. We talked for another 10 minutes. She offered to come stay with me for a few days, but I told her I was fine. I just needed space. When we hung up, I felt lighter somehow. Emma had never liked Jude. And she'd kept quiet about it for 7 years because she didn't want to hurt me. Maybe I should have asked her opinion sooner. The next day Greg Fontaine called. I almost didn't answer. We'd only met a handful of times, holiday parties, bookstore events where Jude would introduce me as my wife, the numbers person, like my career was a quirky personality trait. But I picked up. Lydia, he said, voice careful. I wanted to reach out. I had no idea what Jude was doing with the LLC funds. If I'd known. I believe you, I interrupted. He exhaled, relieved. Thank you. I've been going through the books all week. It's worse than I thought. He's been siphoning money for months. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. I don't even know how I missed it. He was careful, I said. Still. Greg paused. We're terminating his partnership. The operating agreement has an ethics clause that covers financial misconduct. He'll get a small buyout. Legally we have to, but he's done. I can't have someone I don't trust running half the business. I understand. For what it's worth, Greg added quietly, I'm sorry. You deserved better than this. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared out the window at the city below. Jude was losing the bookstore. The business he'd built. The identity he'd wrapped himself in. The place where he held court with authors and regulars who treated him like some kind of literary authority. Gone. Part of me felt bad. We'd spent years building that life together. I'd helped with the finances, attended every event, smiled through countless poetry readings I didn't care about. But a larger part of me felt nothing at all. He made his choices. Now he was living with them. The next piece of fallout came from an unexpected source. Owen texted me Wednesday afternoon. Subject and female had altercation at studio apartment last night. Loud argument. Audible from hallway. She's upset. I stared at the message. About what? I typed back. He didn't tell her he was still married. She thought you were separated. Now she knows the truth. I set my phone down and tried to process that. Jude had told Simone we were separated. That I was difficult. That he was just waiting for the right time to finalize things. He'd lied to her the same way he'd lied to me. I shouldn't have felt satisfied, but I did. Simone wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was just another person Jude had manipulated. 2 days later, Owen confirmed she'd ended it. Moved out of the apartment. Blocked his number. Posted something vague on Instagram about trusting the wrong person and learning hard lessons. Within a week, the apartment was empty. Jude tried calling me that Friday night. I let it go to voicemail. He left a rambling message. Shaky. Almost desperate. Lydia, everything's falling apart. Greg fired me. Simone left. I don't have anywhere to go. I made mistakes, I know that, but I still care about you. We can work this out. Please. Just call me back. I listened to the first 30 seconds, then deleted it. He didn't care about me. He cared about what I represented. Stability. A safety net. someone to fall back on when his other options dried up. But I wasn't that person anymore. Rebecca finalized the divorce paperwork faster than I expected. 6 weeks from the day he was served, it was done. Oregon's no-fault divorce laws meant we didn't have to go to court. Didn't have to stand in front of a judge and detail every betrayal. We just had to agree on terms. And Jude didn't have much room to negotiate. The evidence of financial misconduct was ironclad. Rebecca used it as leverage and it worked. I kept the apartment, my separate accounts, a significant settlement from the bookstore's dissolution, money Greg agreed to as part of severing Jude's partnership. Jude didn't fight any of it. He couldn't afford a lawyer. Couldn't afford to drag things out. He signed everything Rebecca put in front of him and walked away with almost nothing. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard he'd moved back in with his parents. Beaverton, a suburb 30 minutes outside the city. The place he'd spent his entire adult life trying to escape. Now he was back in his childhood bedroom, unemployed, single, broke. I heard he'd taken a part-time job at a chain bookstore. Stocking shelves. Organizing displays. The kind of corporate environment he used to mock when he ran his own place. The man who'd hosted literary salons and debated the merits of independent publishing was now shelving romance novels and cleaning bathrooms. I didn't feel victorious when I heard that. I just felt tired. And maybe a little bit free. One evening, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was walking home from the office when I passed the building where Jude's bookstore used to be. The windows were papered over. A for-lease sign hung in the door. I stopped and looked at it for a long moment. That store had been part of my life for 7 years. I'd attended every opening event. Every author reading. Every wine and cheese night where Jude held court and I smiled politely in the background. And now it was just an empty space. I waited for the sadness to hit. The nostalgia. The sense of loss. But it didn't come. It just felt neutral. That life was over. And I was okay with that. I kept walking, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cool evening air. Somewhere behind me the past was closing up shop. And ahead of me the future was wide open. I kept walking past the empty bookstore, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cool Portland air. When I got home I stood in the doorway of the apartment and looked around. The space felt different. Not smaller or bigger. Just different. Like it was mine now. Fully mine. The beige walls Jude had insisted on were the first thing to go. I spent an entire Saturday repainting. Soft gray. Clean. Modern. The kind of color I'd always wanted but never pushed for because Jude said beige was timeless. Beige was boring. Gray felt like a fresh start. Next came the furniture. The couch where Jude had sat and lied to my face went to a donation center. The bed we'd shared for 7 years? Gone. Replaced with something new, something that didn't carry the weight of his presence. I turned his corner of the bedroom into a home office. A real one. Desk facing the window with a view of the city. Bookshelves I filled with my own books, not the literary fiction he'd curated to impress guests. Some mornings I'd sit there with coffee and just breathe. No performance. No pretending. No trying to be the version of myself that fit into someone else's life. Just me. Figuring out who I was without him. Emma visited one Saturday afternoon, kids in tow. Sorry, she said, wrestling her youngest out of his coat. I know they're a lot. We won't stay long. Stay as long as you want, I said, and I meant it. Her kids tore through the apartment like tiny tornadoes. Jumping on the couch. Running laps around the kitchen island. Shrieking with laughter. Emma apologized 3 times. I didn't mind. The noise felt good. Alive. Boo. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee while her kids played. You look better, Emma said, studying my face. Yeah. Look, lighter. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. I thought about that. I guess I'm not. She smiled. Good. You deserve to be happy, Lydia. You always did. After they left, the apartment was quiet again. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late at the office, volunteered for assignments no one else wanted. It was easier than going home to an empty apartment and sitting with my thoughts. Marcus noticed. One evening around 7 he knocked on my office door holding a bag of takeout. You're going to burn out, he said. You've been here since 6 this morning. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're avoiding going home. He set the bag on my desk. Come on. Take a break. Eat something. I hesitated then nodded. We ate in the break room. Chinese food from the place down the street. Fried rice and spring rolls and too much soy sauce. Marcus told me about his latest disaster on a dating app. A woman who'd lied about her age, her job, and apparently the fact that she was still married. Online dating is a nightmare, he said. I'm starting to think I should just give up and get a cat. I laughed. Actually laughed. It felt good. You ever think about getting back out there? He asked, voice careful. I shrugged. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. He nodded, didn't push. Well, whenever you're ready. You deserve someone who isn't a complete idiot. It was a small moment. Barely anything. But it mattered. A reminder that not everyone was like Jude. That kindness still existed. That maybe someday I'd be able to trust again. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jude. I was grabbing coffee downtown before a client meeting. Stood in line scrolling through emails on my phone. When I looked up, he was there. 2 people ahead of me. He hadn't seen me yet. I almost left. Walked out before he turned around. But something made me stay. He looked different. Smaller somehow. Shoulders hunched. Wearing a jacket I didn't recognize. Hair longer than he used to keep it. When he turned and spotted me, he froze. Lydia. His voice cracked slightly when he said my name. I nodded. Jude. We stood there for a long, awkward moment. The barista called his name. He grabbed his coffee, hesitated, then walked over to where I was standing. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For everything. I believed he meant it. But it didn't change anything. I know, I said. He looked down at his shoes. Are you okay? I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Yeah, I said. Actually, I am. He seemed surprised by that. Like he'd expected me to be falling apart. Like maybe part of him had hoped I would be. That's good, he said. I'm glad. Neither of us knew what to say after that. Finally, the barista called my name. I grabbed my coffee, gave Jude a small nod, and walked out. I didn't look back. That night, I thought about the encounter. How strange it was to see him as a stranger. Someone I used to know but didn't anymore. And I realized I didn't feel anything. Not anger. Not sadness. Not even relief. Just nothing. He was part of my past now. And that's where he'd stay. 6 months after the divorce, Marcus invited me to a gallery opening. No pressure, he said. Just art, wine, and pretending we understand what any of it means. I almost said no. I'd been saying no to everything social for months. But something made me say yes. The gallery was in the Pearl District, a few blocks from my apartment. Small space. White walls. Abstract paintings that looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas and called it art. Marcus was right. It was terrible. But the wine was decent and the company was better. We wandered around, making up ridiculous interpretations for each piece. This one, Marcus said, pointing at a canvas covered in red and black splatters, represents the futility of modern existence. I think it represents a toddler with access to finger paints, I said. He laughed. That's probably more accurate. We stayed for 2 hours. Talked about work, about nothing, about everything except the past. Walking home later, I passed the building where Jude's bookstore used to be. The windows were still papered over. The for lease sign still hanging in the door. I stopped and looked at it for a moment. That store had been part of my life for 7 years. Every weekend event. Every poetry reading. Every moment of a life I thought was real. I waited for the sadness to hit. But it didn't. I just felt neutral. That chapter was closed. I kept walking, hands in my pockets, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. The air was crisp, clean. The kind of night that felt full of possibility. For the first time in a long time I felt like myself again. Not Jude's wife. Not the woman he'd betrayed. Just Lydia. And that was enough. I reached my building, rode the elevator up to the loft and unlocked the door. The apartment was quiet. Warm. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my desk by the window and looked out over the city. Lights stretched out in every direction. Thousands of people living their own lives. Their own stories. I used to think my story was tied to Jude's. That without him I'd be lost. But I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I needed to be. I took a sip of wine and allowed myself a small smile. The woman I'd been when I found that pregnancy test, scared, betrayed, unsure, felt like a stranger now. I built something new. Something stronger. And I'd done it alone. Not because I had to, but because I could. I set down my glass, opened my laptop, and started working on a personal project I'd been thinking about for weeks. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The future was wide open. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. The personal project I'd been working on turned into something bigger than I expected. A financial planning guide for women going through divorce. Practical advice on protecting assets, understanding legal rights, navigating the emotional aftermath while keeping your finances intact. I worked on it for months. Late nights at my desk by the window. Early mornings before heading to the office. It gave me purpose. Something to channel everything I'd learned into something useful. A year after finding the pregnancy test, I was sitting in that same home office on a Saturday morning, refining the final chapter when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost deleted it. Spam probably. But curiosity won. The message loaded. I know this is strange, but I wanted to reach out. I had the baby, a girl. Jude isn't involved. Hasn't been since we broke up. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I didn't know he was still married when we started. I was lied to too. Simone. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Read it 3 times. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Delete the message and let the past stay buried. But another part understood what she was saying. She'd been a victim of Jude's lies just like I had. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me. I hope you and your daughter are okay." The response came immediately, "We are. And I hope you are too." I sat there holding my phone, something tight loosening in my chest. I typed back. "I really am." And I meant it. A few weeks later, I did something I should have done years ago. I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patel. Early 50s, calm voice, office filled with plants and soft lighting that made it easy to talk. The first session was awkward. I didn't know where to start. She made it easy. "Tell me why you're here." So I did. The pregnancy test. The affair. The divorce. The year of rebuilding. She listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, nodding in the right places. "You've been through something traumatic," she said when I finished. "And you handled it remarkably well. But I'm guessing you're here because something still doesn't feel settled." "I don't know if I can trust anyone again," I admitted. "Every time someone gets close, I start looking for signs. Red flags. Lies. It's exhausting." Dr. Patel leaned back in her chair. "That's a normal response to betrayal. Your brain is trying to protect you. But there's a difference between being cautious and being closed off. One keeps you safe. The other keeps you isolated." Over the next few months, we worked through it. Trust. Control. The difference between protecting yourself and punishing yourself. Some sessions were easy. Others left me feeling raw and exposed. "Don't let what he did make you believe everyone will hurt you," Dr. Patel said during one particularly hard session. "Not everyone is Jude. And you deserve to let good people in." It was advice I'm still learning to follow. Some days I felt strong. Independent. Proud of how I'd handled everything. Other days I felt tired. Wondering if I'd ever fully trust anyone again. But I was working on it. And that counted for something. Marcus and I started spending more time together outside of work. Nothing romantic. Not yet. But there was a comfort in his presence I hadn't felt in a long time. We went to movies. Tried new restaurants. Took weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge where the air was clean and the views stretched for miles. One evening we sat by the river watching the sunset. The water was calm, reflecting orange and pink light. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Sure. Do you ever regret how it all went down? The way you exposed him?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said honestly. He made choices that hurt me. I made choices that protected myself. That's not revenge. That's just refusing to be a victim. Marcus nodded slowly. "You're kind of terrifying, you know that?" I laughed. "Good. I've learned that being underestimated is dangerous." He smiled and there was something warm in his eyes. Something that might have been possibility. Maybe someday I'd be ready for that. But not yet. For now I was content just being me. On the anniversary of the day I found the pregnancy test, I did something symbolic. I pulled out the folder I'd kept in my desk drawer. The one filled with evidence. Printed bank statements. Screenshots from the burner phone. Photos Owen had taken. the clinic receipt. Everything that had brought Jude's lies crashing down. I carried it to the fireplace. One of the features I'd loved about the loft when we first moved in but had rarely used. I built a small fire. Watched the flames catch and grow. Then one by one I fed the papers into it. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I didn't need them anymore. The truth was documented in legal records. The divorce was final. Jude was gone. These physical reminders served no purpose except to keep me tethered to the past. I watched the papers curl and blacken. Flames eating through the lies he'd told. The life he'd tried to build on my back. The bank statements burned first. Then the screenshots. Then the photos. When it was done, I poured myself a glass of wine. Something good this time, something I'd been saving for a moment that mattered. I raised the glass toward the fireplace. To the woman I've become, I said quietly to the empty room. Stronger. Wiser. More careful with my trust but not broken. I took a sip and let the wine warm me from the inside. Jude had thought he could hide his betrayal forever. Thought I'd never find out. Never fight back. He'd underestimated me. Forgotten that I'd built a career on finding patterns. On seeing what others missed. On asking questions when things didn't add up. And in the end, that's exactly what brought him down. Not revenge. Just truth. And truth, I'd learned, was the most powerful weapon of all. I finished my wine, set the glass down, and looked around the apartment. Everything here was mine now. Chosen by me. Arranged the way I wanted. The gray walls. The new furniture. The home office where I'd rebuilt my sense of self. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I got married 7 years ago. But it was better. Because it was real. No performance. No pretending. No trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Just me. Alone. Free. And maybe that was the biggest lesson of all. I didn't need someone else to complete me. To validate me. To make my life meaningful. I was whole on my own. Someday maybe I'd let someone in again. Someone who deserved my trust. Someone who saw me for who I really was and valued that. Marcus maybe. Or someone I hadn't met yet. But that was future Lydia's decision to make. Present Lydia was content exactly where she was. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. Portland stretched out below me, lights twinkling in the growing darkness. Somewhere out there Jude was living his reduced life. Working his retail job. Sleeping in his childhood bedroom. Dealing with the consequences of his choices. I didn't feel sorry for him. But I didn't feel angry anymore either. I just felt free. Free from the lies. Free from the weight of trying to save something that was already broken. Free from the version of myself I'd been pretending to be. I took a deep breath and smiled. The storm was over. And I'd survived it. Not just survived, thrived. Built something new from the wreckage. Proven to myself that I was stronger than I'd ever known. The quiet after the storm wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time I was excited to see what came next. I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and headed to bed. Tomorrow was a new day. And I was ready for it. If this story of strategic justice kept you hooked from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Lydia burned all the evidence in her fireplace, symbolizing true freedom from the past. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.